Sir Keir Starmer has faced his first PMQ since a week of dramatic, high-level international diplomacy. With Kemi Badenoch today using 5 of 6 questions to ask the Prime Minister about Ukraine, or are we ignoring what's going on here in the United Kingdom? Now, especially as big welfare cuts seem likely in the spring statement. And, by the way, we can't even seem to defend our own borders, let alone those of Ukraine. Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is GBNews' political editor, Chris Hope, GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. I'm delighted to be joined also by the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, Mike Tapp, who indeed asked the question of the Prime Minister earlier on today. More of that later. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Chris, let's start with this. Quite simply, today, the matter of Ukraine is now being dealt with directly by Donald Trump to Volodymyr Zelensky. He wrote to the guy saying, we accept the peace deal, let's crack on with it. That won't involve Keir Starmer, it won't involve Kemi Badenoch, it won't involve Macron, Scholz, not a lot of them. So why are we having 5 out of 6 questions today about Ukraine? Have our elected representatives forgotten who they work for? They weren't elected in the Ukraine, they're elected in the United Kingdom.
Well, there's 2 things there. I think it's fair enough for Starmer to still own the issue of Zelensky because, yes, a letter's been exchanged and was read out last night to Joint House of Congress by President Donald Trump. But even so, that connection is so important. We are the bridge, I think, to the European Union, and that's why it's being raised in Parliament. But why the leader of the opposition chose to ask 5 out of 6 questions about an issue they both agree on. When they got the 5th one, Keir Starmer said, we were getting on so well when she made it meant vaguely political.
The PMQ shouldn't be a chummy, back-rubbing session. It's about going on the attack.
Not for the first time. Many Tory MPs agree with you, Martin, who I've spoken to. They say, why on earth are we allowing him? Surely you should start off, what's the most difficult question you can ask the Prime Minister, and then ask him that question 6 times, just to get under his skin a bit. Boat arrivals, 1,168 in the past 4 days.
Defend their own borders.
Welfare spending up. There's a speech next week, we think, when they're going to cut welfare spending. A Tory policy, a last election, not a Labour one. 12.8 billion in military aid to Ukraine, but nothing coming back. We saw the US are getting some share of mineral wealth. That won't happen in the UK. We are giving it because it's the right thing to do, and also because problems in the continent wash up on our shore. There are questions to be asked, no question, but I think it was one of those moments, maybe, Martin, you may not like this, when Parliament agrees on something.
Well, no, when you say problems in the continent washing up on our shore...
That's what Starmer said?
Yeah, but there is no greater precipitation of that than a failure to control our own borders. Dinghies in record numbers are literally washing up on our shore.
The numbers are over...
Why are they talking about
1,100, again, it could have been asked by Kemi Badenoch, but the answer back on anything on immigration is, well, you look at the mess you left with us. She would say that Rwanda bill would have got rid of it. Anyway, whatever. You'd have a battle about recording government, but she's not keen to do that.
An opportune moment to bring in Mike Tapp, of course, the MP for Dover, literally the landing ground for this problem. I'll put the same question to you. Many people feel, Mike, we can't control our own borders. We can't stop problems washing up on our shores, to quote the Prime Minister. Why are we still so obsessed with Ukraine?
Well, that's a false equivalence, Martin.
It's not.
We've got a real threat here from Russia. And we've got to ensure, firstly, peace, and that is underpinned by security. Because if there's an invasion that goes further than Ukraine, or even further than it is now into Ukraine, that impacts us here. We've seen the cost of living rise, we've seen the energy rises, we've seen the insecurity that this war with Ukraine with Russia has dealt on this country. So it's really important that we get in place the measures to keep Ukraine safe and, of course, for that future peace.
But Britain and all of mainland Europe has literally done nothing to try and stop this war in 3 years. It's raged on. In fact, a lot of people saying that it seems that there's been a lot of efforts to keep this raging on. Donald Trump, like it or lump him, is at the table. He wants this to end, and that will involve Sir Keir Starmer.
So we've got to remember that the Russians went into Ukraine expecting to be in Kiev in just days and weeks and to take the whole country. Ukraine stood strong with us backing them, with the United States backing them, with Europe backing them. That impacts European security too, and it's important that we are behind Ukraine and that we remain behind Ukraine. But of course, we've got to move to peace, and the work that Donald Trump is doing around this is vital, and the honest broker bridge that Keir Starmer has been playing over the last few weeks has also been vital to this. The fact that those communications between Zelensky and Trump are back on may well be due to that careful diplomacy we've seen from the Prime Minister.
Do you honestly think that?
Absolutely.
The diplomacy is back on, such as it is, because Donald Trump kicked Zelensky out of the White House after a row and basically cut off all of his aid. He's come back on his knees because he knows that the future, like it all a bit, has to involve Donald Trump. It's got nothing to do with Keir Starmer.
We certainly do need peace, and that involves Zelensky, it involves Putin, it involves Trump. But it also involves Keir Starmer leading in Europe. He's had 15 nations over the weekend in this country looking to form that coalition of the willing so that we can underpin any agreement with security so that the Russians can't go further. We can't see a repeat of the Second World War,
Mike,
where all of our citizens will be impacted. It's great work that Keir Starmer's doing.
Mike, many of the coalition of the willing aren't willing. Germany, who's pumped billions of euros into Putin's pockets during the Ukraine war by continued reliance on its gas. It's abject hypocrisy. They've funded the war, and now they're not even a part of the solution of the war.
That Europe has put a lot of money into helping Ukraine defend itself. There will be a strong coalition of the willing, but of course we have to be careful. It's all very delicate at the moment. There's lots of diplomacy. That takes some building, and Keir Starmer is leading on that, and that benefits us all here because it keeps our country safer.
OK, Mike Tapp, you asked the question indeed at PMQs earlier on in the chamber. Let's show that clip now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are delicate moments for the country, and the Prime Minister has led with British values, moral courage, decency, as a true statesman, and with skilled and careful diplomacy. All elected politicians in this House, Mr. Speaker, must appreciate that everything we say could impact that diplomacy. Does the Prime Minister agree that a united House could help us achieve that lasting peace?
Well, let me broaden out his words to the whole House, because I do think that it's hugely to the credit of this House that it is speaking loudly in a united way with one voice in the face of Russian aggression. And that is why we must have lasting peace based on the sovereignty and security of Ukraine. But it certainly helps to all of those observing across the world to see this House speaking powerfully with one voice, united across these benches. And I'm very pleased that we're able to continue in that way.
OK, Mike Tapp, you got your question in there. And maybe explain to our viewers, a lot of them perhaps won't understand, you've served, proudly served your country. So Keir Starmer today opened the session at PMQs by listing, I thought quite movingly actually, the names of servicemen who'd fallen in Afghanistan and Iraq. Tell us about your service and why indeed Ukraine is so passionate to you now.
Yeah, I'm driven by service and British values, to be quite frank with you. I say it a lot and people might get bored with it, but I truly mean it. And that's that courage that we've seen, particularly moral courage, where sometimes it's difficult to lead, but also decency and equality. And we're seeing that from Keir Starmer, acting really in a statesman role and leading from the front. And look, having served, I've seen the best leaders in the world, and Keir Starmer is up there without any shadow of a doubt. He could lead an army, and we're seeing that over.
We haven't got much of an army. That's the problem, though, isn't it? I mean, the problem is all this talk is easy. We've seen it historically in wars. Generals behind the front line ordering people into battle. Indeed, in Iraq, the uniformity of thought is what got us into a bit of a pickle. What I'm trying to sort of say about Ukraine is, should we be really? Some people might say warmongering on forever, or we need to get this finished with, right? Yeah. And we need to get it finished with in a way that's agreeable for British taxpayers, and that shouldn't mean endless billions going overseas.
Look, everything that Keir's doing is aimed at peace. Bolstering our defence capability is aimed at peace. Acting as that honest broker and that bridge is aimed at peace. Everything we're doing with Donald Trump is aimed at achieving that peace.
There's one exchange that Kemi Badenoch had. She said to the PM, can the PM reassure the House that British troops cannot be drawn into war? He said yes, didn't he? What do you think about that? Can he actually say yes and know that he won't put troops in the front line in a harm's way if there's a peacekeeping force?
Well, a peacekeeping force will be from a number of countries, and hopefully that will include the United States, because their involvement in underpinning any security deal or peace deal is really important. But look, there's Article 5, of course, and we'll have to have full agreement on how we'll react if those incidents were to happen. But we mustn't forget, we've already got troops in Estonia on the border who go through that every day as we speak.
Nigel, now I'm going to bring you in. I've been very patiently waiting your turn. Thank you for that. What's your take on, am I just misreading this? Am I being nationalistic, simplistic,
Yes, all those things.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole
I'm just trying to vocalise the fact. I think a lot of people tell me all the time on GB News, we never had anybody speaking out against lockdowns. But we've had political uniformity on Ukraine. People have a right to say this is dragging on for ages and it's costing billions and billions of pounds. And particularly when we're faced with the spectre of putting British boots on the grounds, people are very, very concerned about history repeating itself, as Sir Keir Starmer actually so passionately pointed out at the top of his speech today.
Yeah, and people are right to be concerned. That's absolutely right. But the whole point about today in the House of Commons was that it was a show of unity. This potentially could be incredibly serious. I mean, we're not near World War III, but we are ahead. The doomsday clock is ticking a bit closer to Armageddon than it was, say, a week ago.
Is it, though? Or is it actually going backwards now?
Well, no, it's not going backwards because, I mean, the biggest danger at the moment now is what Putin might do next. Wherever we get to with the peace negotiations.
Donald Trump doesn't want World War III.
No, of course he doesn't. Nobody does.
That's the point.
That's right. And nobody wants that. But this is a point of crisis. And it's right then that Parliament, our national Parliament, has a show of unity, which is why Kemi Badenoch did what she did. And as far as actually playing our part in it, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron will probably go to Washington as part of this peace deal. They've also got to bear in mind that if the whole thing breaks down with America, it'll all fall back on Europe and we'll be right in the centre of it.
Mike Tapp, can I ask you one question about the attitude towards Nigel Farage in Chamber? It seems to be, again, there's a political uniformity to sort of say, oh, he's fawning to Putin, he's a Putin apologist. Is that fair? Or is that playing the man and not the ball?
I'll be really clear on this, that Nigel Farage wraps himself in the flag, but he's no patriot, he's an opportunist. And we've also seen over the years him saying inappropriate comments around Putin and fawning over him. And that's not what British politicians are there to do. We're there to stand up for this country, and that's why that's being said.
Well, fighting talk.
Do you think that disqualifies him from being Prime Minister? What you just said there about him.
Oh, look, the Prime Ministers have to love the country genuinely and not use the flag for their own means.
You don't think Nigel Farage loves Britain?
Absolutely not, no.
I mean, he would definitely counter that word here. I mean, he would say he loves the country because...
he's spent years, as this sort of false patriot, using the flag to his own ends. But what Keir Starmer's doing is representing the flag as a true statesman, as a true leader and as a true patriot with those British values. That's what we need for this country and that's what we've got.
Some would counter to that it was Nigel Farage who went to Brussels and reclaimed the Union flag, a flag that Keir Starmer was happy to change gold and blue. Keir Starmer voted to cancel Brexit.
Well, look, we don't want to reopen those Brexit wounds. We are where we are now.
You're talking about who's patriotic. Who was it who went to vote for Britain to be an independent sovereign nation? It wasn't Keir Starmer.
Look, we've always been an independent sovereign nation, but I don't want to get back into the Brexit argument.
Why
I don't
not?
think we need to. What we've got to do now in government is make the most of what we've inherited because the Brexit deal wasn't fit for purpose from the Conservatives.
OK, excellent stuff. Provocative stuff. No doubt will solicit a reaction later on. Mike Tapp, superb. Nigel Nelson, excellent. Chris Hope, ever